Hello, welcome to Yurt Time 6. Today's episode is on energetic sensitivity. So it's going to be a guided walkthrough on how to become energetically sensitive. Um, we'll go over something like standing meditation, walking meditation. Um, and yeah, just use those as simple exercises and simple examples of how to sense the energy of a situation, and then um, once you get a grasp on that, you can kind of start to try and sense the energy of other situations, internal or external. So like you could look at people walk down the street and try and do the same exercise that we're going to do here, and you should be able to sort of see or feel things a little bit differently. Or you could look at your thoughts in the same way, or other people, or your emotions or actions, or really like you can look at anything in this way, see the energy of the situation. And then it should become obvious, like you'll notice that people will be energetically sensitive to different things in different ways. Kind of determines their talents and their interests and stuff like that. So when we're talking about being energetically sensitive, you're basically just saying you're looking for the electromagnetic field of an event or of an object. So basically not the object itself, but the object's wake as it moves through time or space. It's the field component. Like there's a field component to everything, right? So like science has proven this by showing that like all of matter, as far as we can tell, is charged objects moving. So they all have fields. Like everything has a field component to it, and so that field component permeates all of space. Like if you were to draw the magnetic field of a if you draw the magnetic field of these magnets, it's concentrated near the magnets, but it goes everywhere a little bit, so it's interpermeating everywhere. And that's kind of like the wake of a boat. Like, so a boat can't move through water without disturbing all of that water. And that disturbance of the water is it's what everything else is doing to accommodate movement, right? So when you move, imagine when you move through water, if the water's not moving, as you move through it, you create a wake. And so that wake is kind of the electromagnetic field, but also imagine if you're in water and it's like a river and you're being pushed downstream, then you're your wake becomes very different, right? Your magnetic field becomes very different depending on which currents it's standing in. And so if it's so to study the electromagnetic field, you have to, if you realize that you're basically in this field. It's there. The degree to which you practice perceiving is the degree to which this field gets denser and denser and denser and denser. And so people that look into this space that I'm talking about, it gets denser and denser and denser, and that density has an impact on their body-mind system, similar to the density of water, the density of any fluid. And that density has the variability of the density of space that you have, the density of this field sensitivity you have, the variability of that among the human species is similar to the range of like athleticism that you see, or just skill or physical ability. Which is very wide. It's similar to the range of ability that you see of almost any activity or any skill or any sensitivity that you can possibly imagine. And so that's a huge range. Additionally, you can kind of distract people from this space so they don't know that it even exists, and it kind of atrophies and gets very, 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 very low, just from disuse. But if you know about it, it's relatively easy to train it, inhabit it, remain there all the time. And then in that space is like, when you're interacting in that space, you're learning to organize that space the same way that you would your body. And so as you practice organizing there, you just get good at stuff. You get good at understanding things. You get good at moving, walking, being, dialoguing, creating. Because as an event, it's no different than moving through water. Any motion. So the type of water that you're in, like let's say that you step into something that you want to do. It's kind of flowing that way, and then if you over here is something you don't want to do, that want. That want and that not want are just two streams. And then lo and behold, you find that they are actually this. And you're going down the drain together. this one is opposing that one, but and so that's really the best way, like the whole, if you're having a perception of good and bad, it means that you're in a water current that's doing this. Otherwise, it's like something that you're kind of like swimming against consciously, or swimming with consciously, or even surfing something that's happening, right? Surfing is different. You can't surf a current, right? So you can surf a wave. So to actually go anywhere with any speed, it's like, yeah, you have to find a strong current somewhere, which are unreliable, and who knows where those going. Or you can find a wave somewhere, and then on the wave, you can actually kind of ride that. But what's really most cool of all is just the recognition of it. And so there's infinite space outward, and there's infinite space inward. And then in that space is the wake or the drag of the body. So then to, I guess, do that is just to so you stand, right? It should, like what we're doing is trying to float. So coaching this should seem absurd, right? So it's like you're going to be changing an attribute that no one can see, not even yourself, but you like focus right on that. That's the energetic spatial sensitivity, and that is as simple as dancing with somebody. You listen to their movements and have their movements dictate your movements. So it's that same type of listening that you could facilitate it by floating in water. Practice floating in water. It generates an identical understanding to what you need to do this, which you don't need to be in water to do this. But water is a ridiculous teacher that you probably have some experience with. And so realize, like, if you take a step forward, it's because there is a current, a wave, a wake. And you realize you can't really go against the water very hard. You can't push against what's going on very much unless you're unconscious. Like looking at reality directly like makes you conscious. So the generation of awake only happens from unconscious behavior. The instant you become conscious, there's no separation between the energetic space, the consciousness, the mind, and that. So you're always moving with what's happening, no matter what. What does all this have to do with energetic sensitivity? I don't know. I think it's a difficult subject to talk about it. I don't think people do enough. I think it's an important subject to bring up. It has a direct impact on politics, science, senses. totally forgot you were there. What was I doing? How did I even get here? How did I get here? Where am I? So, right, like whatever movement you choose, doing it consciously, like with a reason, with purpose, with desire, with whatever, you're moving with the flow of existence or what have you. So all of the field is kind of pull instead of the field being awake, the field is a current around you, and so that's always there, as is your ability to move and to be unconscious. So like action, what people normally view as action is actually unconscious behavior where you're fighting the field, which is what happens when you kind of swim. And a conscious behavior is when you're aligned with the field, because the field is your consciousness. So the body isn't moving necessarily, the field is moving the body, so it leaves no wake. So there's no like identity in that way. It's maximal sensitivity. That's not to say that any of these things are good or bad, right? It's like you have to sleep and be awake. You need to be good at sleeping, which is actually conscious movement. So like a yoga practice or a movement practice or a practice of anything, virtue, prayer, like any of these are unconscious practices for your unconscious self to do. And then the conscious practice is when the self is actually relaxed and you are the consciousness moving the self. So there's yin and yang style exercises in the Chinese stuff, I believe. I don't know. Seems like it. If I was them, that's what I would call it. And then there's various movements in consciousness. There's currents and there's waves. So you can get on waves. And it has to be dense enough or think enough for you to feel. Like you have to be present enough to actually feel it. And so that sensitivity is just what people have in like sports, dance, intellectual stuff. So like to do it with a walking meditation, instead of walking, you have to use the mind to generate a current and have the current move you. So if you're not very sensitive or you're not strong enough to move the current yourself, like so you can just cause a pretty big area to start moving. And it's kind of like what I would call like shadow yang, or like a invisible active component is when you're moving the field and that moves your body. It's like you're still interfering on a particular way, like you're still causing a wake. Like when you move yourself externally like that, it still causes a bigger wake. But it's totally fine to practice that. So it's like you still push, but you might not even be strong enough to do that. You just go, what are you talking about? So if you go in a circle at first for a while, you'll be able to feel this habit or this pattern of this circle. This is why it feels so good when you get off a treadmill, basically, is that there's this, that's it, like, go get on a treadmill for a while, walk really fast, and then get off, and you'll notice that you feel like you're in a current. It's because you are. So the repetitive cyclical activities like this, or like a sleep-wake cycle, or any sort of training pattern, you go in a circle, and eventually you can stop, and the circle will keep going on its own. So that's what's really good about any sort of repetitive cyclical habit is like once it gets going, then you can stop and you'll kind of continue on in the same direction regardless of if you fight it or not. Or if you jump into a particular motivational stream, it doesn't matter. And that same thing can happen if you're motivated by any sort of thing. It's like you'll want to stop and then you can't stop because it just goes. This is really like the thing with like any sort of emotional problems, addictions, whatever. It's just been done in such a repetitive pattern that when you stop, it just keeps going. So there's ways of dealing with it that's like swimming to the side, basically. It's the only thing you can do. Like once you're caught in a habit, it's like you have to almost ignore it and just swim to the side. It doesn't even matter if you're doing it or not doing it, as long as the side swimming's happening. So that's another duality trick of like, oh, if you're seeing good and bad, it's because you're in a vortex. But if you're seeing a ton of struggle, it's because you're in a current that's going in a direction you don't want to go. And the fighting, it's not going to do anything, and going with it is going in a direction you don't want to go. So it's like you're in that same paradox of like the normal two things. So it's like you pursue a goal that's totally tangent to the deal that you're having with the current, which is taking you away from something usually that you don't like. Otherwise, you're like, yes, I'm stuck in a current. So side swimming a current is really only when like it's, oh shit, a habit's kind of already formed. And you'll find that if you fight the habit, like no matter how hard you fight the habit, you're not going to overtake the current or whatever. So it's just even the victories that you want to celebrate in terms of that your main struggle, those victories are meaningless. Because the direction you want to go is totally sideways. It's like non-evaluable. So that's why like weird behavior is required when you get stuck. So, like exercising in public, doing stuff like in public, like it puts you in motivational currents sometimes. So you'll notice that, like, if you go to a library or you go to a gym or you go to a temple, you'll be in a current that encourages particular behavior. Particular stores, if you're around particular people, it all generates currents in mind. And then you can go pretty deep in realizing that, like, all physicality or blocks or objects is like two currents that are like pressing each other, and it makes these kind of like wakes, these ripples, these disturbances. And two flows are going against each other. So you can always kind of see that it goes sideways, and that can cause it to, first it'll transmute into that, and then potentially. And so that's just happening on like all these different levels. Everything from sports leagues to religions. And so you can feel it just in, walking on a treadmill or walking in a circle, and then that's the energy around you. And you can learn to pay attention to it. And when you do that, it pays attention to you, and the resistance or the tension goes away, and you just become whatever's happening. But that's also just not just whatever. So it's like from there, this consciousness, this field's doing all sorts of different things. And so depending on how you angle into it, it's like you got opportunities to sail, or you just look, where am I going? Where did I, like, hey, how do I, hey, there's land, can I actually get out of this mess? Just go on land? Possibly, in your own isolated little bubble. That's not a bad idea. So anyway, inject sensitivity.